Hi again. I don't have a joke for you this time because this is actually within a lesson. This is a lesson within a lesson. So you're already supposed to be paying attention and you know that. But what I'm going to tell you about now is just a little bit of different ways to keep data on kids. You can hear a whole bunch about data-based decision making, and it is important to do this. And that way, if you collect data, you know that you're actually seeing changes or not seeing changes, and that you're not making decisions based on your mood, whether you got in a fight with your partner or woke up late or whatever other reason. So it's important to have data so that you're sure that your decisions are being made objectively. Now, don't let that scare you, because as I've told you many times, the key is to do things intelligently, not to do things the hard way, to do things the smart way. So you can keep data in a number of simple ways, depending on the type you're keeping. And the first type of data that we're going to talk about is event recording. And in event recording, all you are doing is keeping track of the number of times something happens. So you can do that just as simply as having a pad in front of you and say your behavior is the child is swearing. First, you have your good definition of swearing. The child is using words not used on the 6 o'clock news. Okay, so when the child says something that is determined to be a curse word by your definition, every time you hear it, you just make a little tally mark. A little mark on your paper. The kid says it again. Another little tally mark. Third time in 5 minutes, you're starting to think he's training for a career as a sailor. You mark down another tally. Now, if you're keeping a frequency count as your event recording, what you're doing is counting the total number of times he swears, and it can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever. Rate is different from frequency because you're going to figure out how many times per minute he sweared, or you're going to break it down so that you don't have to have all equal intervals of measurement. Does that make sense? So you could have one time where you're keeping data for 5 minutes, another time where you're keeping it for 15 minutes, but you can compare the rate per 5 minutes to see if the swearing is increasing or decreasing. Now, sometimes you would use event recording for things that happen that have a discrete start and a stop time, so it's easy to tell when it's occurred and when it hasn't. Interval recording would be for something that happens continuously or isn't as easy to count individual occurrences. So what you would do is make yourself a form like this. And I know it's backwards for you, but basically these are just little marks for different 5-minute periods or different 1-minute periods. With whole interval recording, what you would do is if the student's engaging in the behavior for the entire time, for example, the behavior is writing on his desk. If he's writing on his desk for the entire minute, you mark it off that box. The next interval, he's not writing, he writes on his desk for 30 seconds, but the next 30 seconds he's not, so you don't mark in the box. And the third minute, or 30 seconds, third minute, whatever period of time we're talking about, he's writing after the whole time, then you would mark it. You only mark the interval if he's doing the behavior for the entire time that you're observing. Partial interval, you would mark the box if he does it at any time during the interval. So let's suppose his behavior is picking his nose. If you happen to observe the child picking his nose at any particular time during that interval, then you would mark it. This is for behaviors that aren't quite as frequent as those that you would use for whole interval. Yet another type using the same type of graph as this is what's called momentary time sampling. And what that is for behaviors that are so frequent that you're only going to mark down if they're happening at the exact end of the interval. You don't have time to watch the child all the time, so you're just marking down if they're doing it at the end of the interval. Set yourself a timer so that you can get a cheap vibrator to put in your pocket. When you feel it vibrate, you look up, you see if the child's engaging in the behavior. It could be pulling little Susie's hair. If he pulls little Susie's hair all the time, you can't watch him constantly. You let little Susie deal with it. Just kidding. But whatever your behavior is, you mark it only if it's occurring at the end of the interval. Different types of things that you might want to record, other than these for different types of behaviors, are duration recording. If you've got, for example, a child who throws a tantrum, you might find that it's more beneficial to use duration recording, and in that case, you're keeping track of the amount of time that the tantrum lasts. Latency recording is the amount of time you keep track of from when you give an instruction until when the child starts to do what you told him to. So if you tell a child to pull out his book and get to work, and it takes him 3 minutes, you would write down 3 minutes. The next day it may take him 2 minutes, you write down 2 minutes. But what you're doing is keeping track of and trying to reduce the amount of time it takes him to start on a task once it's given to him. Anecdotal recording, you just want to be as specific as possible and do not interject opinions. You'll use words like it appeared or I observed, and then tell exactly what had happened. Do not convey attitudes, but what you're going to do is describe in as much detail what occurred on a given situation. This is good for uncommon behaviors such as getting in fights or things that don't happen real frequently where you want to have a narrative. And remember to tell what happened before it, what the behavior was as specifically as possible without opinions, just what you saw, just the facts, and then what happened afterwards. The last type of data collection we're going to keep or talk about for this purpose right now is permanent product recording, and that is basically keeping samples of the student's work, keeping work samples for math so that you can see new skills as they emerge, or handwriting. You can use these to put in a portfolio. They're products that you can use at IEP meetings or to show to parents. So permanent product recording is really no effort for you at all. It's just saving the student's work in a systematic way. Now, I mentioned doing things easily. When we talk about things like event recording, frequency counts, or rate counts, you can do it as simply as putting a piece of tape on your arm if you've got good hygiene like me, and making a mark on your arm each time the student engages in the behavior. You can put pennies in one pocket and move them from one pocket to the other when the student engages in the behavior. Here's a good one if you want to increase a behavior, is get a bag of popcorn, go to a thrift store and get an old dryer popcorn popper and put a jar on your desk. When the behavior occurs, put a piece of popcorn in the jar or a piece of macaroni, whatever it is, and as the jar fills up, you can keep a count of how many pieces you're putting in, but then you can allow the students to earn a party. So if you're using popcorn, they can have a popcorn party, and you can also at the same time let them see an educational video like Donald Duck and Math Magic Land, which you'll see later this semester. And so you're increasing their behavior while you're getting them to work for something that's both entertaining and educational. You got it going on now. Now your kids want to be in class. All right. If you have questions, call me. Bye.